Mimi here with another sew along as part of my new pre-spring patterns for simplicity. Today we're going to be working on pattern 8045, which is this amazing short and maxi length dress. For this pattern, we're going to need, of course, the pattern. You're going to need some elastic, 1/4 inch wide, and of course you're going to need fabric. Now for fabric, this is made for a stretch, any two-way stretch knit. You can use a jersey, a lightweight double knit, a stretch velvet. You have a whole lot of options. Now if you're new to sewing or you just need a refresher course, follow the link in the description box below and watch my sewing basics video. Watch that all the way through where I show you how to cut your pattern pieces out, how to cut your pattern pieces out of fabric, how to read all of the instructions that are given on your pattern pieces. After you're done with that video, then come back and sew along with me. Now whether you're doing view A or view B, the construction is exactly the same. The only difference is the pattern pieces that you're going to be cutting out. So I'm going to go over that really quickly with you. Now if you're cutting out view B, which is the short version and the one that I'm going to be making on camera for the sake of the tutorial, then you're just going to cut out front and back, and you're going to cut along the line that says cut line for view B. Now if you want to make the long version, that's totally cool, and there is no difference in the sewing of it. The only difference is you're going to be cutting out this pattern piece without cutting at this line, so you would be cutting the entire pattern piece. And then along with that, you're going to see an extension piece. You're going to see it for 1A and for 2A. And what that means is that at the bottom of, let's say, 1A, you're going to piece these together. And the markings on the extension pattern piece should lay right on top of your dress pattern. And once they're lined up, you can go ahead and tape this together, and then this becomes one entire pattern piece. Let's go over the remaining pattern pieces. Now, you should have cut pattern piece 1 and 2, which is the front and back of our dress. You're going to cut out pattern piece number 4, which is our sleeve. And you're going to cut out pattern piece number 5, which is the collar. Now you're going to see that you're going to have pattern piece 6, 7, and 3. Now these do not get cut out of fabric. These are for your elastic. So this is the guide to tell you how much elastic you need to cut out. So for example, for the side, you're going to cut out 2 pieces. For the collar, you're going to cut out 2 pieces, the length of these pieces. And then of course, for the side of your dress, you're going to cut out 2 pieces. Make sure that you transfer all of the dots that you see on your elastic guide onto your elastic. They will be very critical when you start to piece this together. Make sure that you also transfer all of the markings on your pattern pieces to your fabric. Okay, I've cut out all of my fabric and my elastic. I have also transferred all of my markings. Once you have all of your fabric and your elastic cut out, we can start sewing. Okay, we're going to start with our front and our back pieces. I want you to place front to back, right sides facing on top of each other, so you're looking at the wrong side of your fabric. And we're going to pin along the entire side. So you should have a notch here, and you're going to pin there first, and then you're going to pin at the bottom. And then you're going to pin a couple more times along your side. Now, if you transferred all of your markings correctly, you should have 3 dots on your side, both for your front and your back. You want to make sure that you transfer those markings. Continue pinning both sides the same way, and then we're going to sew our side seams together. Okay, we're going to start sewing, working our way from the bottom all the way up. Now you're going to sew the other side seam the same exact way. Okay, once you have your side seams sewn together, we're going to attach our elastic. And so what you're going to do is, the reason I wanted you to transfer all of your markings is because you have 3 dots on your elastic that need to align with the 3 dots on your fabric. So we're going to pin, making sure that we align those dots. And then you're going to stretch to meet the other dot on your fabric. So you're going to be stretching your elastic to meet the other dot. And you're going to do this as we're sewing, we're going to stretch. So I'm just going to have you pin it for now. And then stretch to meet your very last dot and pin there. And we're going to be using a zigzag stitch. So I want you to switch your machine over to a zigzag stitch. and we're going to start at the bottom. I want you to Place your needle in first and then remove your first pin. Okay, we're going to start sewing, and as you're going along, you're just going to stretch your elastic. You want to keep your elastic within the seam allowance. Don't go beyond it. You're going to sew the other elastic onto your other side seam the same exact way. Once you have both side seams done, you're going to set this aside and grab your sleeves. And with right sides facing, I want you to fold your sleeve in half. Align your notch. And then pin at your notch and then at the bottom of your sleeve. And starting at the bottom, we're going to sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to sew your other side seam the same way, and then you're going to press your seam open or serge your seam allowance if you have a serger. Otherwise, you can just press your seam open. Once you have both your sleeves sewn together, we're going to do the hem of our sleeve. So you're going to turn under 1/4 of an inch, and then you'll turn over the remaining hem allowance. And you're going to stitch close to the folded edge all the way around. You're going to continue until you reach your initial stitching, and you're going to do the same thing on the other sleeve. Now that we have our sleeves finished, we're going to attach it to our dress. So we're going to use the underarm seam, and we're going to align it with our side seam and make sure that your notches are aligned. So you should have 2 for your back. That's how you know you're attaching them right. And 1 for the front, and right sides should be facing each other. So let's align our seam lines first, and then go ahead and pin your double notch, and then go ahead and pin at the top, and then move over to the other side, pinning your single notch, and then pin at the top. And you're going to attach the other sleeve the same way. Once you have them both pinned, we're going to sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance from one top all the way down to the center, and then over to the other side. Back stitch at the beginning and at the end. Now attach your other sleeve the same way. Now once both your sleeves are attached, feel free to serge off your seam allowance. Set this aside, and we're going to work on our collar. So first we're going to make sure that right sides are facing each other, and we're going to sew our center back seam closed. Now we have one giant tube, and so I'm going to have you press this seam open. Okay, once you press your seam open, we're going to fold it in half. And we're going to baste along the entire bottom edge. Fold it. Make sure your seam lines are matching. And using the longest stitch your machine has, you're just going to baste this together all the way around. Now we're going to grab our elastic for the side of our collar. Okay, so this is clearly our center back seam. So on the side of our collar, you should have 2 dots. One here, and then one at the bottom. This is where our elastic is going to go on each side. We're going to do the same thing that we did for our side seams. You're going to align your dots And using a zigzag stitch, we're going to pull until our dot on the elastic reaches the dot on our fabric. And you can pin that in place if you want to. And you're going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, now with your dress turned wrong side out and the elastic side of your collar on the outside, we're going to slip this over our dress. And you have dots, so you want to make sure that everything is aligned. You have a dot here that should align with the center, exactly where your elastic is. That's your side of your shoulder. And we're going to pin. And you're going to continue to pin all the way around. Make sure that you align those dots. Once you have your entire collar pinned along the upper edge of your dress, we're going to stitch it down using a normal length stitch. We're going to stitch 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around, starting at the center back. Okay, we're going to grab our elastic and we're going to overlap it by about 5/8 of an inch, and we're going to stitch it together. And now we're going to pin our elastic to our dress, and we're going to start at the center back. So look for that center back seam. Now the right side of the dress should be facing you. You should be looking at the right side of the dress, so don't think you're doing it wrong. If you look up here on the inside, you'll see the elastic to the side of the shoulder, but I actually am stitching my elastic onto the right side of my dress within my seam allowance. So I'm just going to look for my center back. Here it is on the inside. And I'm going to place my elastic there, and I'm going to start to pin. And just like you did before, you're going to match the dots on your elastic to the dots on your fabric and pin your elastic all the way around. Okay, once you have it pinned, we're going to stitch it down. I'm going to use a zigzag stitch. You can use a straight stitch. Just make sure that you're stretching as you're sewing if you want. I prefer a zigzag stitch because it just gives me more stretch. And you're going to stitch this all the way down, stretching just a tad, and you're going to make sure that your elastic stays within your seam allowance. Once you're done, since the right side of your dress is facing you, when you turn over your collar, you'll notice that both the right side of the collar is seen and the right side of the dress is seen. Now you could go ahead and pull out your sleeves, and the only thing that's left to do is the hem of our dress. So you're going to serge the bottom of your dress if you have a serger. I don't serge in the tutorials simply because it's just faster to just tell you to do it versus me doing it. But if you do have a serger, you will want to serge the bottom of your dress, or you can turn under a 1/4 inch and then turn in the remaining hem allowance, and you can finish your hem that way. Or like I said, you can serge it, turn over your hem allowance, and then we're going to stitch close to the edge all the way around. And I like to start at the center or at the side seam. You're going to continue until you get all the way around, and then you'll be done. That's all there is to it. I hope you've enjoyed this sew along. Until next time, peace.